So one of the things that I hear a lot of people talk about, including myself years ago, was struggling to put together a budget. And so when I'm talking to clients, especially when they're just starting their home buying journey, one of the questions that inevitably comes up is, man, can I afford to buy a house? Right. And so a lot of times what I recommend that they do is that they actually put a budget together, that they track their spending, and it's not as overwhelming as it may sound, right? There's actually a super simple way of going about doing this, and I got to give credit where credit's due. My wife and I use this strategy after listening to a podcast from Mindy Jensen at BiggerPockets, and so shout out to Mindy for sharing her strategy, because I can tell you it absolutely works. And it works not just in being able to give you the confidence to have a better grasp on what you're spending, but you'll see after only a few weeks of using this strategy, it starts to tweak your behavior around money in a constructive way, so that you're more focused on the longer term outcome than the immediate gratification. And so if you're like me, you probably have tried dozens upon dozens of times to set up a budget where you sit down with your significant other or by yourself and you start mapping out, like, okay, how much is our mortgage? How much do we want to spend on groceries? How much do we want to spend on going out? What kind of a budget do we want to set? And again, if you're like me, at the end of the month, despite going through that exercise, you look back and you're over in every single category, right? Or for the most part, in most categories. And so I have found that that particular strategy of projecting out a budget does not work for me, because my brain is still kind of operating on kind of in the moment, gimme mode. There's a great book called Profit First that I really recommend that people check out. And in that book, it talks about the importance of really kind of stepping with intentionality and understanding how people spend their money. And one of the key insights that it provides is that most of us spend money because we're using digital currency, whether it's through a credit card or Zelle or Venmo. We're not interacting with the physicality of money anymore. And so it used to be the case that we would pull out our wallets, open them up, and there was either money in there or there wasn't. And it was clear to us kind of where we were in our budget. Well, nowadays, because 80 to 90% of our transactions are digital, if not more, we're not keeping as close an eye on what's actually going on. And what's worse is that because a lot of us, including myself, have set up auto pay to take care of certain bills and things, we may open up our app to kind of see how much money we have in it, or a credit card app to see how much we've spent so far. And it may look good in that moment, but what that moment doesn't reflect is those charges that are pending, right? That are coming on in the next few days, the next week. And so even though in that moment the budget looks good, in a couple of weeks it might not. And so this strategy that I'm about to present to you here, I'm going to show you the digital element of it, but I'm really going to encourage you to print this thing out and do it in analog. Like, actually have this printed out, ready to go at your door, so that you can actually truly implement this, because this is not going to be a long-term commitment. You do this for a month or two, and it's amazing the changes that you're going to start taking on as you start to implement this strategy. And so let me break it down what this strategy consists of. So the digital component that I mentioned is this sheet here that you can just click on the link below, pull it up for yourself, and be able to download it and modify it. And I'm going to really encourage you to modify it by front loading any of those expenses that you have that are hard expenses. They have to happen every single month. So here's a quick example. Your rent or mortgage, right? It has to be spent every single month. So front load it. If you have a cell phone bill, front load it. If you're paying for things like the internet, I'm not sure what tip is, but this is an example of like expense you documented, but we'll just say, I don't know, subscription, Netflix, right? Things that you're already committed to spending every single month. You're front loading it, right? And if you also have savings goals, you probably have heard that saying of pay yourself first. This is how you pay yourself first, right? Too often, and I'm a part of this cohort, if I'm saving, it's out of sheer luck because it's money that I somehow did not get spent throughout the month when I was younger. And so that kind of went into savings temporarily, but inevitably it found itself back into my spending patterns. And so to avoid that dynamic, being able to proactively essentially account for the savings that you're setting for yourself as a goal up front allows you to be much more intentional about how you're spending your money for the rest of the month, right? So front load this with all of those subscriptions, expenses, anything that is coming out of your account every single month, car payments, so on and so forth, right? And the reason why you want to front load that digitally is that you want to just be able to print this out every single month, right? And again, you're only going to do this for 1 or 2 months. So don't think you're having to commit to this for 6 months or a year. But by having this ready to go, if you find yourself needing to go into a 3rd month or a 4th month of doing this, it's already set up for you. But the key aspects of this is just keeping it super simple. You're going to record the date, you're going to record an expense, you're going to record the amount that comes out, and then you're going to do a subtotal. And then as you can see, every additional item that you log, you're adding it to that previous subtotal. So here we have $3,000 for the rent, and then we have $250 for the cell phone. So now the balance is $3,250. And then we add the internet at $99. So now our balance is $3,349, right? So you add it every single time. And by front loading those monthly hard expenses, you're going to see what you are committing to pay every month. And one of the key things that illuminated for us when we did this about 3-4 years ago is that by the time we kind of did our analysis and looked at where our money was going, I'd say 2/3, if not 3/4 of our monthly earnings were already spent, right? And so that idea of like, oh, no worry, my wife at the time was a nurse. I had a consulting job, was making 6 figures. We're both making 6 figures. And we were like, we've got the money. Like, yeah, no worries. We didn't think about it too much. And so when we started to actually pencil out, front load all the expenses, we kind of realized like, wow, we are stretched thin before we can even start thinking about what are we gonna spend on going out, what are we gonna spend on groceries or anything like that. And so that simple kind of like insight really helped calibrate my mind to be able to align myself towards focusing on longer term goals instead of that immediate satisfaction, because I was on that habit of I love to read, and so if I heard about a book on a podcast or somebody recommended it, I was quick to jump into Amazon and just buy it, right? And it sits on my shelf. Maybe I read it, maybe I don't, but that satisfaction of saying, ooh, I want to learn that, order it, now I have the access to it. And I was spending $10 to $15 a couple of times a week, once a week, and not thinking anything of it because it feels so small, right? And so to avoid that, going this route where you're proactively logging your expenses, it forced me to kind of say, do I really need this, right? And so the behavioral change that happened for me is instead of jumping into Amazon and immediately hitting buy and then getting excited for that package to arrive at my door, what I started to do was at minimum putting that book into a list inside of Amazon for future, right? So that at least it still satisfies that lizard brain immediate gratification need of clicking something to make me feel like something's coming my way. Then after that, I would go into a couple of the apps that I would highly recommend if you're an avid reader like I am. So Libby, if you're not familiar with it, in the Sacramento area especially, it links to our City of Sacramento library system. And so you can borrow all their digital books, audio books, music. And so that's completely free. So then the next step for me was to go into that and see if that book was available. And if it was, great. I would just download it. It's free. And now I have access to it for 21 days on my Kindle or on my phone. The other thing I would do is the other app that I'd recommend for folks that are really wanting to continue to read but don't want to continue to spend the money is LibriVox. This is an audiobook platform that allows you to be able to download audiobooks that are in the public domain and that people are reading. And so it's just a great way to continue exposing yourself to information without having to spend that $10 to $15 every single time. And so the key point of success to this whole process is that you and your partner are committing to every single expense. It does not matter how small. The moment you walk in your door, you have this printed out with a couple of blank sheets, right? And you'll see that this has a few blank sheets. You don't have to print them all out. But you print it out with like 3 or 4 blank sheets, and you can always print out more. But you log it, and you're committing to it because you want to keep a proactive tracking record of your expenses. And what you're going to find, aside from that insight as to where your money has been going in the past, you're also going to find that it's going to start to hurt to spend a little bit because you're going to have to acknowledge it by writing it into the log. And so there was definite times where I could have bought something, but I'm like, you know what? I don't want to have to log it in. So let me just put it back because I don't need it, right? So that's the behavioral change that you're going to start to see over time. And so I really encourage you to check out this strategy. It completely changed the game for us in terms of how we were spending money and really helped us hone in on where we wanted our money to go versus where it was just kind of by default disappearing into. And so if you're finding yourself in that latter category of money just seems to disappear before you're ever able to account for it, this is going to be an incredible tool to help put you on a path towards actually building some savings, to hitting some of your financial goals, and to make sure that you're just on a stronger track moving forward. Hopefully this helps. If you have any questions, please feel free to post them in the comments below. Would love to engage with people, especially hear from people if you end up using this tool. It's completely free. Just go ahead and download it via the link below. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys on the next one.